I had a question about your statistics about how there's a disproportionate amount of single motherhood in African American communities, right?
Right.
And so starting in 1960 or 1970 with Roe v. Wade, we had this boom of legalization of abortion, which I kind of appreciate your understanding of the pro-life argument. I was very pro-choice until I heard that, and it kind of made me in that middle ground of like, oh, I don't really know what to do. So I did some research. And so finding that when abortion was legalized, you look at Romania and then you look at America, right? This is the Freakonomics argument. You saw that there was a decrease in crime in between people under 25 in the 1990s. And so this kind of made me think that maybe this is a correlation between that of the white and African American communities, because at that time, African American communities were predominantly low income. So they didn't have access to that form of contraception, which I think is why we feel that today, while there is this huge proportion of, what you're saying, 70% of single motherhoods are African American. If not, that's the reason. I was just curious, what is the reason, and then what is the solution to that?
Okay, so abortion is not the reason for the drop in crime. First of all, even if it were the reason for the drop in crime, it's not an excuse for killing babies. So, so that's number one. The evidence that it's not the reason for the drop in crime, Barry Latzer makes this argument in a book it's a very good book called The Rise and Fall of Violent Crime in America. And he talks about the fact that there was a huge violent crime spike in the United States in the mid-1980s. And it only ended in about 1994. From 1994 to 2010, there was an enormous violent crime decrease. Okay, the problem is that abortion, the top coterie of people who commit crimes are people between the ages of 14 and 20. That is the key age where people commit crimes. And what you see is that abortion was legalized in 1973. What you would assume then is that the crime rates would begin to drop in the late 80s. Right? They begin to drop in like 1987. Right? That's when people who had been born but weren't would have turned 14 or 15 years old. Right? But that's not what happened. The crime rates only began to drop in 1994, 1995, coincident with something Hillary Clinton ran away from, her husband's crackdown on crime. And once you put more cops on the streets and put people in jail for crime, it turns out they're not on the streets to commit crime. So the correlation doesn't actually fit. So the idea that that's the case, it also doesn't make sense, because the fact is that the number of abortions has decreased markedly over the last 10 or 15 years, and you haven't seen a consummate spike in crime. So abortion rates started to decrease by the mid-90s. And so you would figure that there would have been a big spike in crime around 2008, 2009, no big spike in crime. So the correlation doesn't even fit. If you're going to, correlation doesn't equal causation, but in order for there to be causation, there has to at least be some proof of correlation. There's not even proof of correlation.